I haven't done a video in a while, so wanted to do a little update since the last couple of days have been somewhat busy, or the last month or so. It's been somewhat busy, and over the last couple of days, I've gotten some books in that mean something personal to me, so I thought I would share that. Um, as an urge there to talk about comics collecting and what you look for and what sales you pass on and what stuff is valued at. Maybe I'll get into that in the future, but my collecting is a little targeted. I go after certain things. I'm looking for certain types of deals. I'm trying to, I'm committing myself to paying less than what the book is actually worth. And I use a composite of Overstreet's price guide and an app called Comics Price Guide, which is an online comic database. It was started in '95. And I'm looking for certain books. So here's what came in over the last couple of days. One of the things I'm looking for is the Frank Miller run on Daredevil. And I've got about 2/3 of it at this point. Um, it's not real hard to collect. A lot of it's out there. Generally, you can get the books at 20 a piece, which is roughly the retail value. And I'm looking for better than that. So this one, which is not the Death of Elektra, it's the one after the Death of Elektra. The Death of Elektra is 181. I got 11 books from the Miller run at, I want to say $6 each, which isn't bad given that many of them are $20 books. Yeah, there's certain runs, certain writers, certain characters, certain stories, artists that I consider synonymous with the comics industry, and that's really what I'm after. So Frank Miller's Daredevil run is one of them, and he's on my list to get signatures. So I will hopefully get some of those Daredevils signed from his run, like the Death of Elektra. Another one would be Chris Claremont's X-Men run, and I've already got a good chunk of that. That's actually where I started. Those were the books I found in Sandpoint, Idaho, that drew my attention back to comics collecting. Because I've been reading comics my entire life. And I'll get back to that. But I've never considered them a collection. I bought them, I read them, I kept them. But there have been two or three times throughout the course of my life / career that I've sold off my collection because I needed money or didn't want to move them or whatever. And so I have friends like Josh is looking at all the stuff I'm posting and going, yeah, I've got all that. I'm like, I know, but you held on to your stuff when you bought it in the 90s and I wasn't able to. So a lot of these are books I've owned before, but I never owned the Frank Miller run on Daredevil. I never owned the Claremont run on X-Men. Sometimes I buy something because it's a story or a piece of art that's important either to me or financially. And what got me back into comics in junior high school was the story Secret Wars. Um, Secret Wars was written to sell toys, if you look at it historically, because they collected all of the major heroes and villains together into one story, and then they put out a toy line that went along with it. So there's actually a variant cover to the Secret Wars event from a couple of years ago. This one's from the 80s. A couple of years ago that has variant covers of the action figures. And I've got the Doctor Doom one that's a variant cover for issue 8 of that recent storyline, because I believe cinematically the best way to introduce Doctor Doom into the MCU might be to do Secret Wars. With Doom as an anti-hero figure in the middle of it because he's complicated. It also allows you to bring in the X-Men and the Fantastic Four through an in-universe event rather than having to just write them in and go, oh, they've been here the whole time, which is not what they're going to do. So it was Spider-Man's black costume in ASM 252. But then I was like, where does that come from? And so I picked up Secret Wars 1 because the editorial notes in 252 said read Secret Wars to find out what the deal is. And then he gets the black costume in issue 8, which eventually becomes Venom. So at the time, I had those but that's one of the things I've sold off. So they were one of the first things I went after when I decided to collect. So I have 10 of the 12 issues of Secret Wars. I'm still missing number 9 and number 11, which I'll pick up. Those are not expensive. Only number 8 is expensive. 1's a decent amount of money, and 12's a little bit of money. But 8, introducing the black costume that becomes Venom, is the valuable one. I just like this piece of art. The frame here is a showcase frame. You put the book in and then you hang it on the wall. So I bought 3 of them, see how they work. And so I can rotate out the books in the frame to change the art in my domicile. So I chose this one. This is on the wall. There's a Batman that's on the wall, and there's a Daredevil that's on the wall. I rotated out of Spider-Man when I decided to put the Secret Wars one up. The third one I wanted to share with you is this one. This is Infinity Gauntlet number 1, and it's graded at 9.0 out of 10, which is pretty good. The reason it's a red, usually these are either blue is normal, yellow is signature confirmed on it. Green is this is what we grade it with reservations, with an exception, which often happens with regards to signatures. And red indicates that there is some amateur restoration that happened. Apparently somewhere on this cover, somebody did some color touch-ups to make it look less weathered than it was when it sold. That didn't bother me. It's 9.0, and it has 3 confirmed signatures on it. One of them is Jim Starlin. Jim Starlin is the guy that wrote Infinity Gauntlet, which is the story that Infinity War and Avengers Endgame is, let's say, based on, even though it's kind of loosely based on. That's where Thanos comes from, and you can tell that's where the Infinity Stones come from, all that. So that's Starlin's signature. He also appears in the group therapy scene in Avengers Endgame. I think he asks, so what'd you do? That's his line. He's the bald guy with the goatee. That's Jim Starlin. This is George Perez. He's the artist of the cover. And then, the one that made this so exciting to pick up, that is Stan Lee's signature. So this is Infinity Gauntlet number 1, which by itself is not terribly expensive. But 3 key signatures on it, 9.0. I was very excited to pick up this piece, and now it's in the collection. There you go. Got one more book to share with you. Got to top Stan Lee's signature. This is the first comic book story I ever read that I remember ever reading. The story is Amazing Spider-Man number 114. It's right before Dr. Octopus gets married to Aunt May. Don't ask. And it's the second issue of Hammerhead's appearance. Hammerhead was in the recent DLC for the Amazing Spider-Man video game. So his first appearance is 113. This is his second appearance, and this is the first story I remember reading in second grade. This is the book I picked up at the student marketplace. However, actually it's not. This is not the book I remember, because I'm pretty sure I read it when it was in Marvel Tales. Marvel Tales is a Marvel book that reprints important stories or stories that they want the readers to have access to. Because this, I think, was published in 1973. I would have been 2. The Marvel Tales has a red cover, and in my memory, the framing isn't black, it's red. So I think Marvel Tales retelling of this, which would have been published in, I want to say it was 79, is the actual first book I ever read. But this is the story. I don't tend to collect reprints. It's just not my thing. And that's one thing to be careful of. There's a whole lot of 2 books that people jump for that you should be a little careful about are Amazing Spider-Man 252, which is the first appearance of the black suit, as we said, and The Incredible Hulk 181, which is the first full appearance of Wolverine. He appears in cameo at the end of 180, but his first full appearance is 181. That's the famous one. Every once in a while, Marvel does reprints, and there is what's called a facsimile edition of both of those. Now, if there's a book, if it says True Believers across the top, it's a reprint. So it's not worth all that much. It's worth cover probably less. Um, but the facsimile editions are deceiving because they look exactly like the original book. The